Hello everyone and welcome to Traffic Corner Tuesday. My name is Nancy Crow. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for SPAC Consulting and your host for today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone of a couple housekeeping rules. Please mute your mics to minimize the background noise during the presentation. Also, join the conversation. Today's presentation is intended to be an interactive dialogue. I encourage attendees to ask questions and share your experience throughout the presentation. Just type your question or comment in the chat area, and we'll be sure to answer your question throughout the presentation. I also want to take a moment to thank you for participating in today's session. Today's session is brought to you by SPAC Consulting, which is part of the SPAC Enterprise family of companies. SPAC Enterprise was started out of the need for traffic data collection products and engineering tools and services for our clients. SPAC Enterprise consists of a group of 6 traffic engineering related companies, including Mike on Traffic, a traffic engineering blog, Counting Cars, an online store selling traffic data collection products, SPAC Consulting, a traffic engineering consulting firm, SPAC Academy, an online store with digital tools for transportation professionals, Traffic Data Inc., a traffic data collection firm for the Midwest, and tripgeneration.org, an online source for free trip generation data. We recently released our May schedule, and now we're looking into June. I want to invite everybody to participate and attend our upcoming session on June 13th for travel demand management. Look for emails over the next couple of weeks with the details of how to access that session and upcoming sessions in June. Finally, I'd like to introduce our 2 speakers for today. Bryant Fisek is the Vice President of SPAC Consulting and is also widely known in the transportation industry, having managed over 700 traffic engineering projects. He is a graduate of the University of Minnesota and an expert in Synchro, SimTraffic, vStro, and vSim traffic modeling software packages. He thrives on developing creative solutions to traffic and transportation issues, so please be sure to ask some questions of Bryant this afternoon. He's interesting fact about Bryant. Outside of being one of our many authors on Mike on Traffic blog, he also is learning the guitar and currently knows 2 chords. So congratulations, Bryant. Also joining us today is Vern Swing. Vern is a senior traffic engineer at SPAC Consulting. He has over 30 years of traffic experience and has a passion for eminent domain projects and specializes in traffic impact studies and signal design and migration design. During his career, Vern has owned his own engineering firm, worked at the Washington State Department of Transportation, and has worked as part of a large full-service engineering organization. His diverse background has given Vern insights into the challenges facing both private engineering firms and public agencies and helped guide him into unique solutions for his clients. Vern is also a regular contributor to Mike on Traffic, and he is also a master bridge player. So please join me today in welcoming Bryant and Vern. Mike's not here. Bryant and Vern, take it away.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Somehow knowing 2 chords on the guitar just doesn't seem as exciting as a master bridge player, but
that's overrated.
Hopefully I'll get up to 3 soon. All right, so our topic today, we're talking about convenience stores, convenience store access, and really balancing the mobility and the access that goes along with them. So first thing we need to do to kind of set the stage is really to talk about access management and what that means in terms of traffic and our traffic approach. So we've got the basic definitions of access management here. Pulled exclusively from Wikipedia, so you too can look this up. But really, when we look at it for access management, it is that comparison of mobility and access. So as we increase access, you can see we've got the definitions for streets here. You get to our local streets, lots of access. Increase mobility, you move your way up to freeways.
And looking at a photo here from Minneapolis as you're going into and out of town, you can see this is a freeway situation. There's no intersecting streets. The direction of traffic is separated by a raised median, and traffic is moving quickly. And as in the opposite end of the spectrum, here is a local street. There's a lot of driveways to individual garages. The idea is not mobility here, it is convenience and access for people who live there.
Yeah, so just comparing the two, obviously most all the people on here, you probably know all this, but again, to set the stage, this is what we're looking at as we balance those two key factors of mobility and access. So when we turn towards access management, what we're talking about is obviously managing that access. So looking at all these driveways on the picture here, if you are applying access management, it would be what can we do to reduce that access to increase the mobility. So why do we do that? What are the benefits of access management?
The benefits of access management, and sort of one of the originating ideas behind access management, is as you consider an intersection, if it's a full movement intersection, there are a number of different opportunities for conflict. As you can see in the slide, there's 32 different conflict points in a four-way intersection with all movements allowed. Access management says, let's reduce those conflicts. That will enhance mobility because people won't have to slow down. They can progress through the corridor more easily. And as a byproduct, it's also safer. If you have fewer conflict points, there's less opportunity for accidents.
And that's the graph we have on the side here, just looking at the index crashes to access. You can see as your access goes up, your corresponding crash goes up right along with it. So I think that's pretty intuitive to traffic engineers. It just makes sense. You have more access, you have more opportunities for conflict. That's going to increase the crashes, reduce your safety. Similarly, like Vern was saying, you reduce that access, less need to slow down, less need for those turns. You're obviously going to be able to proceed through the corridor quicker. So that's why we look at access management. And like the picture we showed before, your freeway is your ultimate example of access management. Access is tightly controlled, and you can only get on or off the freeway at specific points. Everybody's moving in the same direction. There's no at-grade intersections. So you can see that again, ultimate example of why we have that.
So when you're considering access management, it's certainly a good thing to put into place as if you have a blank sheet of paper, or if you're out in a rural area and you have the opportunity to implement access management, you can reduce the number of conflicts that way, and you can set up the corridor in a way that the adjacent land uses have an understanding of what's taking place and can design around that as they become developed. So as you're going and looking at the slide here, obviously on the far left, there's very little going on. It's just a wide open corridor, almost the blank sheet of paper. Easy to put in a typical access management plan. As you progress further and further to the right, there's more development along the corridor that's shown there until you get to the furthest slide where there's a lot of development going on. And now, as we would refer to it, you're trying to retrofit an access management plan into a developed area. Yeah.
So you can see on that far right side, lots of driveways if you're trying to implement something on that road. Excuse me. Allergies again. But as you're trying to implement something on that road, you're going to be dealing with a lot of driveways, a lot of property owners. Your task of implementing access management on that corridor has just become much harder as you have to deal with more things. All right, so now that we've set the baseline, we can turn towards our topic, convenience store access. So what we're talking about here, many different types obviously, but what we're really talking about is gas stations, fuel station stores. They have the pumps out there, they have the convenience aspect, stores that go with them. You hop in, you can get, you can pick up snacks. Some of them have some types of hot food as well, lots of different things, but basically it's the fuel and the convenience aspect of it. The fuel with the store is what we're focused on here.
And as you think about access for these type of stores, for the store itself and from the owner's side of it, the name says everything. Convenience. They want as many access points as they can get, as close to the front door as they can get them, to make it as seamless for the driver to get in and out of their site as possible.
Mm-hmm. All right, so thinking back about our access management, this is out in a suburb of the Twin Cities. We have our convenience store out here, and oops. So we're right off a state highway here, county road on the cross street. So this is more towards that open slate. The roads were there. This had not been developed yet. When they came into the site, they knew what their access was going to be. They wanted them far away from the state road. They wanted a square intersection. There's actually a signal here, so it makes sense, but very easy to implement access management at that point, because going into it, you can say these are the requirements. This makes sense.
And the end user knew in advance what they were getting into. They planned for it. It was all in place. They planned for it. They got what they wanted. They're in the corner where they have great visibility for the drivers that are going by, yet they have as close an access as is allowed on that facility.
Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, is a little further in the Twin City. Our convenience, our fuel station is here. And as we look at that, it's not off a state road, but it is 2 county roads, so higher volumes on each of them. And then as you look at the site, 4 access points. So this one is close to where I live, and it's been there forever. And when they put it in, that's what they want. There was no consideration of access management. Here's all the access they wanted. It was basically go in there. So now, if we were to come in and look at this site, now you're dealing with an owner who, this is the way it's always been, this is what they've had. Why are you trying to change what they're doing?
In the meantime, if you're the county, you're looking at this and you're saying, wow, there's all this access out here. There's all these opportunities for conflict. There's 2 driveways that are very close to the intersection where people are trying to make decisions about what to do. This is something we would like to fix.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is where now, and this is where, and we're getting into the focus of this presentation, is this retrofit idea. As we look at the convenience store, what are the things we look at as we go through? So county comes in, they say they want to close those 2, the developer or the owner's looking at it and saying, why are you closing this? What does that mean for me? So as we look at it, these retrofit issues, what are the things we're thinking about as we approach that type of project?
So as the designer who is representing a convenience store, and you're faced with the retrofit situation, there are 4 or 5 key issues that should be looked at for the convenience side of things. First and foremost is pedestrian and vehicular conflicts, as most convenience stores have their gas stations out front, their pumps out front, and then there's a walk aisle, if you will, that's used both by vehicles and by pedestrians to go into the store to buy their product. So there is that inherent vehicular pedestrian conflict. However, if driveways are set up the way they like them, oftentimes there's not as much interference in that aspect, and it's very slow moving.
So you're really looking at the circulation issues. How are vehicles moving around? How are people, if they're at the pump, how are they walking to the front door? How are vehicles moving across the front door? How are those vehicles moving in and out of the site? So looking at those at that circulation and looking at those vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to pedestrian conflict areas.
Next, the vehicle to vehicle conflict areas is important. Also in that many of these stores are set up so if the vehicle wants to get in and get out without using the convenience part of the store, they can avoid some of those conflicts. Also, stores are set up with car washes oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, a vehicle to vehicle conflict associated with vehicles leaving or egressing from a car wash is not a good thing. The cars then back up in the car wash, and oftentimes they're mechanical, and this could really become a problem. So that's another consideration as one thinks about how circulation on the site is and how that's going to be impacted by retrofitting an access management plan.
Yep. Number 3 is you got to consider your trucks, your fuel truck deliveries. So as they come into the site, as they're trying to get to where they need to go, how do they move around that site? So in this picture, you can see off to the left here, their tires are hopping the curb. Clearly that's not that's not something you want. So that circulation is a big issue to make sure that the trucks can actually get into the site and go where they need to go.
And oftentimes that's dictated by where the refineries are, where the fuel trucks are originating as their destination is this station. They may be forced to come in from that particular direction. So the next item that one wants to think about is the location of the fuel tanks within the site. The fuel tanks and the current rules within the convenience store industry basically dictate that the gas has to be dumped from the fueling trucks on the passenger side of the truck. That way the driver is out of the truck and standing out there to ensure that there's no spills, there's no other things going on that may result in a different kind of problem if it were if there was a spill and could be rather explosive.
Yeah, hopefully we can avoid that.
So,
all right, so let's move into case study here of a retrofit that Vern in particular worked on. And again, we're in the Twin Cities here. This is in our southeast metro area on Robert Street. So what we have here is just a picture. This is Robert Street right here.
In the before condition.
In the before condition. So this was from a few years ago. Google's a great tool, Google Earth, to be able to look back at that stuff. But so you can see what we've got. We've got the 5-lane road, the center turn lane, but looking at all these driveways up and down the corridor, this is representative of the whole area that they looked at. And it was really almost a free-for-all. I mean, multiple driveways within a short distance. There's no access control per se. People can go where they want to go. So obviously as a state facility, they're more concerned about mobility. They want to make sure they can move along. So they looked at what type of access management they could implement here. And so just looking at a comment here, we had one, are we implying that there has been a problem with fuel truck drivers not tending to the fuel delivery process? We're not implying it. I would say the people who put the rules in are implying it.
Yeah,
That's
industry,
why they put the rule in.
the industry was concerned about that.
Good comment, though. But anyway, on the right here, you can see this is eventually what they put in, at least in this area, and we'll get to our specific location. But they're looking at that median down the middle, specific turn lanes at the public intersections as opposed to individual driveways, and even at this public one down at the south end here, you can see they went to a 3/4 access at this one. The one at the north of the picture is signalized, so you can see in terms of access management and improving mobility on this corridor, this is it. This is what does it. All these little things that they implement will do that. So now if we get specifically to our site.
And looking at our site, as you can see, this is the before condition. There are 2 accesses on Robert Street. There are also 2 accesses on the side street.
So here's Robert,
and
here's
on
your
the
side
north
street on the north.
And the project was announced to the store owner, who then approached us and said, "What does this mean to us? This is one of our top 5 stores in the nation. We feel like, what does this mean? What is it going to do to our ability to function in the long term?" So going back to the 4 criteria we listed before, we checked out, what are the opportunities for vehicular pedestrian conflicts? Is that going to change? Looking at the site, as you can see there's not a lot that can be done as far as reducing that. It looks like it's going to stay fairly static. The ability for vehicular conflicts, well, it may reduce a little bit without having left turns coming into the site off of Robert Street. The real question is, are there going to be increased vehicular conflicts on site? Mm-hmm. And looking at that, unless for some reason delivery vehicles are going to plug up the car wash, it does not appear that there's any real change in those kind of conflicts. So this really seemed to be a question of whether or not the fueling trucks, which arrived from the south and in the before condition drove into the northernmost Robert Street driveway, pulled over to where the fuel tanks are, and as you can see, that's a fairly tight space as is, and they were able to dump from the passenger side at that location. Whether or not those trucks, when you put a median down Robert Street, would still have the same ability to get in and access those fuel tank locations. So we spent some time using auto turns and playing around with how the site might work. And basically the only conclusion we could come to is you would have to come down on the side street back into the site. So in other words, you would be on the wrong side of the road, and then you'd be backing into the site, and Holiday Station stores at least, and I know a number of others, really frown upon having their fueling trucks backing up in congested public areas. So that didn't seem to be a viable solution. When we approached the state with the issue that they're having difficulty getting their fuel tanks in here, initially there was a lot of pushback about, well, that's, you're just going to have to figure out a way to do this. When we showed them all the analysis, we then presented them with what we thought was a solution that could work, which is to put in surmountable curbs for that stretch of the median, which allows them to maintain the integrity of their access management plan, in that passenger vehicles would be discouraged from traversing that median section, while the tanker trucks were allowed to then traverse that section. Mm-hmm. After consideration, the state bought into this, and in the end, luckily for them, they didn't have to purchase this convenience store. So,
yes,
which might have been a fairly expensive endeavor on their part.
yeah, it's one of the busiest sites. Just in general, anything we can do to try to avoid the lawyers is obviously a good thing, and so it's trying to come up with situations like that, solutions to a problem that work for everyone. So in this case, that surmountable curb really helped out. It allowed for the trucks who knew what to do, they could go over it, get to the fuel tanks where they needed to go, and it prevented other drivers. So it's a good compromise position. Unfortunately, we don't have pictures of the after. Google, Bing, other online that we looked at did not have. They had it in construction, but nothing that we could point to specifically, unfortunately. So, but it is just a standard median down the front. It's just instead of the barrier curb, it has the sloped curb to allow the car to climb over it, and obviously a little bit thicker concrete to handle that weight. It's not just a quick 4-inch concrete cover in the median.
And yeah, my bad. I'm sorry I failed to take photos to show that. So one of the questions that's come up is why not a roadway diet, and thinking about the pedestrian issues. That certainly is always something that's of concern, and this project, as part of the Robert Street project, it was intended to be a streetscape project. So your comment is quite germane. The volumes, unfortunately, are quite heavy out there.
Yep.
Fortunately for holiday station stores, but unfortunately for the idea of putting in a diet on the road. That would have certainly been helpful. The two-way left turn lane question, that's what was in place, and that's what was being eliminated as a higher level access management treatment.
And that's in direct relation to the traffic in the through volumes too. They just again, this is a state facility, state highway. They want to keep traffic moving. They want to keep traffic going, and with all those different access points, there were just too many turns and, frankly, not enough gaps in that through traffic, except when the signal might have provided them. So that created the reason, or one of the reasons for that median.
And are U-turns allowed at signals on Robert Street? At some of them, they haven't disallowed them at all locations. They have allowed them at some of them. I do believe they are allowed at this location, but certainly that's not going to address the issue of getting the tanker trucks to the fueling tanks.
Yeah, your passenger cars can make that pretty easily. Some of your bigger vehicles, single unit delivery trucks maybe, but when you're looking at the fuel tanks, there's no way you're taking them on a U-turn there. And I'll preempt the question, which I'm sure is coming. Yes, they considered roundabouts at some of these intersections, which would have been good, but you can see how close, even on this picture, how close that Holiday Station is to the corner. To try to get a multi-lane roundabout in that location would have just taken up too much space. It just wasn't a good retrofit solution, even though that would have helped for some of the things. That even with a U-turn, fuel trucks at this location trying to do the U-turn and then coming back to turn in and get to those fuel tanks would have been a challenge.
So the take-home message here really is, engage the landowners adjacent to the access management retrofit that's taking place, and if there are situations such as this one where you can provide a solution to keep the business viable, it's certainly something that you should consider. and hopefully it's something that can be done without disturbing the integrity of the access management plan.
Yep. And it's really, and then obviously you have to consider all points for that business too. It's not just how cars are going to get there. How are they going to get their deliveries? In this case, the fuel trucks and other things. So really trying to capture all that stuff. So thank you for attending. We're at our 1 o'clock. So we want to do, make sure people can leave if they want. Our next one is on June 13th. We'll hit travel demand management plans. So we hope to see you in a few weeks here. And we will hang on a couple minutes here to see if there's any last questions before we sign off. So one comment here, maybe the easiest solution with all the access points is to change the type of road. If there were another facility nearby that could handle that volume, that would be good, but just changing the jurisdiction or just changing what it's called wouldn't change how people want to access that. So easy on paper, not easy in implementation. And next comment, any example photos of a surmountable curb? We'll get one and we'll plan it. We typically send these presentations back out to people. We'll get a picture of that so people can see what that looks like.
Yeah, we'll get a picture of the exact of this particular one. I think
Okay.
it's, I know it's done, so we can look at it.
Awesome. Any anecdotal evidence of passenger cars traveling on the new mountable median?
Not that we're aware of. I've spoken to the store owner since it's opened, and certainly no evidence from tire tracks or any of that this is something that happens regularly. I'm sure there's probably some folks who do that, because I know we have photos of in the snowy conditions here in Minnesota, where in the wintertime people occasionally decide that traversing the median is easier than taking some other route.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm sure it happens, but we've heard nothing to suggest that it's an issue. All right, last call. All right, I think that's it then. Again, thanks everyone, and
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
we hope to see you again soon.